but just for the record, what's your name?
We could take up the whole session and just tell me my name. Glen, Evan, James, John, George, Joseph, Ethier. I was raised Catholic, and they told me I could take the names of my godfather and the names of my sponsor when I confirmed, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. I picked up all their names, and I never used them, but every once in a while I mentioned it. But it actually was Glen, Evan, James, Ethier.
Okay.
Which was Ethier back in the Midwest and various places, but it's the French name, Ethier. And up in Montreal, for example, where there's several phone book pages of Ethiers, it sounds like itchy when they say it. Glen Etchy. My father used to tell me that, and I found it out later in life that did sound like itchy. But anyway, it's Glen Ethier, and it keeps them from calling my kids chloroform and anesthetic and that sort of stuff if they hear the name Ethier, So, so I thought I gave them something by changing it.
That makes sense. Conscious to be the names. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in 1922, November 24th, and lived there up until I went in the Army and came back and lived a few more years and then moved out to Seattle area, to Kirkland, Washington, to take a job here in Trade Association Management.
Okay. And so those are two places you basically lived, was Milwaukee and then here in Seattle?
And here, those are really the only two places I've lived permanently.
Okay. So who made up the family that you grew up with?
I had a brother, 5 years older, and a sister, 4 years younger. And my mother and father, when he was around. And my brother only until I was 8 years old. Because being depression and type things, I know it was 1930. Because in about 1929, we moved from the apartment I grew up in, the flat. My father never owned a home, but we moved from there, and we moved 7 times in the next 5 years before we came back and moved into the same place that where I was born, and was there, of course, until. As I say, when we started our first move, my brother had started high school, and he didn't want to move to a different high school where we moved, and so he went to live with my aunt and uncle, because he was just into high school at 12 or 13, and he never came back home to live. He stayed with them. They had no children. And they were in business, and he I thought, lived a wonderful life because he had money, and he was very generous, though. When I needed a bicycle, he gave me his old one, and then when he got a car, I got his motor scooter, and when he got a better car, I got his car. He was always doing things for us, but it was a sad parting, and I just adored him. He was these are things that happened in those days. He at least was only a couple blocks away, and when we moved back to that area, so it was just one of those little bites in life that you take when you're stride.
Who makes up your family today?
Right now, it's my children, really. Well, but I'm living with one of my children. Back in 1990, we sold our home because all our children were gone. We had 6 children, and they were now out. We had a 6-bedroom, 3-bath home, and we We sold it and helped them move into a nice home that they just wanted badly because they had horses, and helped them buy it. So I technically owned about a fifth of the home. And for it, I got a 5-room apartment. We had a 5-room apartment, which was a maid's quarters at first. And so my wife and I lived there for another 5 years before she died. And so today I'm back there because I remarried 3 years ago, and my wife has had a severe blow to the head, evidently. She fell and hit something and got a subdural hematoma, which they operated on, and she has not come back from it yet. It hasn't emerged. It's 3 months, and it's like amnesia or whatever. But we decided to move out and let her kids sell her home, because it's a 2-story home, and they said she's never going back in a 2-story home because she would fall and hurt herself anyway. But so I'm back with my one daughter and her husband and their 3 children, and the 2 boys are 25 and 27, and they're still living at home, still going to college. And the girl who's a rival for her mother, said, I can't live here. I love you, but I can't live here. And she's out now on her own. But now she's back working for my daughter in her business. But that's my family now, is the children of one of my children.
And going back, I guess starting with the beginning, what is your earliest recollection?
Oh, that's one that I actually do remember, because I once remembered it and told my mother. I said, why do I remember I saw myself riding a little toy train that you can sit on has steering, and riding down a driveway with a whole bunch of streetcars over to the left. And she said, oh, you couldn't remember that. You were only 2. I said, well, I can remember. I remember the streetcar on the left. She said, good Lord, she couldn't believe it, But that was my earliest memory of any, and that was just sort of out of the blue somewhere. But that, yeah, not much. I can't even think of anything else more before the place that I thought I grew up in and lived in.
That's a early one. So describe your mother.
Well, my mother, I've often said, is a saint, was a saint. She tolerated my father, who was a wonderful, friendly, calm, generous, honest man who made a fortune by the time he was 27 at that time, because he sold it out his business for $250,000, which is like $1 million. But then during the next 5 years, gambled and drank it away. And my mother used to keep a couple of cigar boxes full of canceled checks from the Chinese gambling dens in case she needed it for divorce. Never used it, but she stuck by him. And I didn't notice it. My sister told me several times that as much as they had that problem, whenever he came home, and you usually could hear him coming home because he'd either hit the garbage cans driving in or something in the back, Mother would go and quickly look in front of the mirror, prump her hair and everything before she'd go and greet him. But she raised us. He never came to a single one of my athletic events, although he made a big joke out of it, and it was really a joke. He was a semi-professional football, basketball, and baseball player. And he played hardball until he was 52. He was the shortstop on this team. And the only times I went with him anywhere was on a Sunday. He'd take me out to the ballpark and buy me an ice cream cone or something, and I'd sit and watch him play baseball for an hour. And when he would come home drunk, if he had any money, he'd always hand us a quarter or $50. He was just a jovial gentleman, and he'd go to sleep. He never angry, never. But I always wanted him. I needed him, and I just never could get him close. Never could relate to him. And both my brother and I were cheerleaders in high school, and he used to laugh at the tavern, which he considered his office. He said, "Here is the best right end in Milwaukee's history, and I raised 2 cheerleaders." A likable guy, a man's man. He was, I remember playing Schaskopf, which is sheep's head. And it involves hitting the table with your fist when you lay a card on it. You don't just take the play, you and it was all over the bound, pounding. It was a great guy. Never learned it. But anyway, that was the whole thing. There's nothing more to say about my father, actually, because he made it, and then occasionally, well, I guess I'll have to bring him up a little later anyway, as he enters into a couple of things. But that was our family, and my mother.
So, going back to your mother, when you think of your mother, what expectations did you have of her as a child?
I expected her to be there at all times, and I didn't expect, there was always something to eat. I remember how she often made sure we ate, and then she'd take the scraps, so to speak, she'd clean up whatever was left on our plates. And even though sometimes our meal, I can't remember at the moment whether it was a dinner meal or a lunch, it was a slice of Wonder Bread or 2 cut into little cubes, and milk and sugar sprinkled on them. And that'd fill us up, for the time being. And a couple of our early things interfered with my comfort level when I got married, because we often had corn on the cob as our total meal for dinner. And I could eat 4 of those, corn on the cob. Another time for dinner we'd have just hamburgers. And you could buy them 6 for $1. Buy them by the bag full, White Tower hamburgers, 6 for $1, and we'd have plenty of hamburgers. Later, when my wife would make hamburgers, frequently her idea was hamburgers and corn on the cob. And I just couldn't stand that, because I couldn't eat too many hamburgers and not save room for the corn, and I couldn't eat either one, and it bothered me. I didn't want to complain. It just bothered me that they have both of those on the same meal. I wanted to gorge on one or the other. I was used to that.
It didn't make sense to have them together.
But that's, she was always there. She worked quite, through life. And she became, when she got older, she was a wonderful seamstress, and she's built, made dresses, wedding dresses for people, and all kinds of things like that. It was part of her. But later in life, she became a nanny, and she was a nanny for one of the most prominent people in the city. We lived in the higher end place in Milwaukee, near the lake, and she was just peddled around for anybody. She would go there for the first 6 weeks after a baby was born, and take care of the baby and the mother, and did that just for years. And they called her Oosie. They couldn't get Mrs. Ethier. It was Oosie was her name. And she just never, she had no idea how many she had done this for, but maybe 100 or more, This is quite a woman. And she played the piano. Sang songs to us and recited endlessly from her recitation days. Poems that she'd memorized, long narrative poems, all of them sad. not all of them, I guess some of them very funny, but many of them quite sad. And oh, how we loved those sad tales. Poor thing. She was our idol. So I was very close to her, yes, but not. Never could get close to my father, as pleasant as he was.
This might be a little redundant, but who did you depend on as a child?
My mother, totally. I mean, I came home, she was home, and I couldn't depend on my father to be anywhere at any particular time. And so it was always my mother.
Was there any peripheral people in your life? Like people that weren't part of your core family that you depended on?
Well, my aunt and uncle that took my brother in, which was an expediency, but it became permanent because she had lost one child early and had never been able to have another one. And he eventually went to work for them. They were grooming both of us to go to work for their company. They were producers of foundry sands. And they had sand pits all over the state and elsewhere, but he was the engineer. Clyde took chemical engineering and became the quite competent salesman for them and troubleshooter out in the field. And I was going to be the accountant. Her husband, my uncle, had been a reporter and a PR man, and he said, and I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to write, and he said, you'll die, you'll starve, you can't make a living at it, and get a good business education, then you can do anything you want. And so I listened, and I thought, well, instead of taking a journalism course, I took business administration. And I did work for them for through while I was going to college. Did their payroll and a lot of their accounting for them, but I could not work for them in any way. It was just, my uncle was a little strange. She was secretive. She did everything behind his back to make things right, because he was not a good businessman himself, and someone complained that they weren't paid for their first week's work, and I knew what had happened, because you always take an extra week, and then from that point on, and then when you quit, you're going to get another week after that. I knew how that worked, so I wrote him a letter explaining that. Well, how he got his check, and this is what's for, and you will get one when you're through for etc. My uncle said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Don't waste all your time on that," so forth. And he said, "It's just our records show that you had paid in full. Be done with it. You can't dip, And no, I couldn't go along with that. So when I went in the Army and came back and finished college, I went other ways. But it should have been my brother and I working together there, but he stayed with them, and one time, years later, his wife said, "Glenn, is there anything that you could do to convince Clyde to take these wonderful jobs that are being offered to him around in the foundries and around the country, because he really knows his business, and he's going to die here." And I said, "I don't think so. I know his loyalty. I know," and he just would not. I had the guts to leave and not, stay there, but I said, "I don't think he will." But I did talk to him, and I said, no, this is going to be pretty good, because he had good jobs offered to him that he never took. He stayed with them until they died. So
I think that close to your mom and dad, we could probably go over unless there's something else you want to add to being close to your mom and dad, or why not?
No, I felt sorry for my mother, actually, because she was in a family that was dominated by the women. My aunt dominated my uncle, as you know, got him into business right out of, and her father had died when she was 15 or so. And so her mother for 40 years, who was a German immigrant, raised the 3 children, and raised them well, except for my father. He was the baby of the family. And so she was down, and then the aunt took over and manipulated the family, and as I knew her growing up, when I would say anything about, she'd say, well, who's your new friend or that? And I said, and she'd say, what does his father do? She had that climbing, and so there was a dominant grandmother and a dominant aunt who supported us many times. And they were in business. One dad would, and she was very generous. But she'd give me something, don't tell anybody now, don't tell me I gave this to you, And so I saw that domination, and my mother had suffered from it because at the only time that I remember that they were had out that he lived over there for several months with my aunt and uncle, with his sister, in other words. And I don't know, they just protected him and coddled him, and my mother took the brunt. So I just had great respect for her resiliency, and she was a cheerful, wonderful thing. Everything was great with her. And she had one trait that was most interesting. The doorbell rang or the phone rang, she would run to it. Into her late years, she would run to the door or run to the phone. And she joked one time, said, oh, you never know, it might be the pot of gold calling. No one can give us something. She was, And she had graduated from Spencerian Business College, and she had beautiful handwriting. Just beautiful. And then, of course, the best thing is that she read to us from my book house and various places, and recited. And that gave me the feeling of poetry right from the beginning. Rhythm and meter and the rest. Then later, my brother was, I don't know what you call him, but purist, perfectionist. He didn't believe that anything that didn't have rhythm and rhyme was not poetry. That's doggerel. That's such a free verse was not for him. And during the war years, when we wrote to each other, I'd send him a poem that I'd written, and he'd rewrite it and send it back and show me how much better it was if you could make it rhyme. But rhyme, when it's fun and it's technically, interesting, and I do it, I've done it to extremes with multiple internal rhymes, and I love the challenge of it. It's restrictive. You can't, your thoughts can't truly flow if you have to end it with a da-da, da-da, or a rhyme. And at one time later, I had entered a song word contest, and I had written some of the triple rhyme, just fit the thing and so forth. And they critiqued it, and whoever critiqued it said, don't try so hard to make something rhyme. Let it flow. Rhyme right with crime or something, anything like that. And I said, what do you mean? Don't make sense. It's not work for me. I enjoy it. And what about Bob Dylan, for crumb's sake? He does it all the time, you know. But I resented her critique of my work because I was showing. I see, if you can rhyme, why not? You know, in music. But for regular poetry, I think I've gone much more to free verse in recent years than I was. In fact, when I was in barbershop quartet, they wanted to kick me out because I was adding a note that wasn't fair, wasn't legitimate. The four voices have to stay like this. You can't do this. And I was always striking out for something a little bit new. But that's you know, you can see things always keep coming in if you do it. That's about the side of it. I really felt sorry for her because she didn't have a husband standing up for her. He was manipulated because he needed them, his sister and brother. His brother, for example, this is how he went to work for Western Iron Stores as a copy boy, just taking stuff around, and he ended up president of the company. My aunt started her own company and became the biggest core sands, foundry sands distributor in the area. My dad became the sales manager for Chain Belt Manufacturing Company in that town, and then went out on his own at 27, formed his own company, Clinton Distributing Company, got big. The story I get was his partner was crooked and he wouldn't have any part of it, so he sold out to his partner for $250,000. And that was the last that he ever saw of big money. But he was a broker in foundry in the brass, bronze, and aluminum production. And he used to broker deals. He knew where to get something done. Somebody needed it done. He could find it and he'd get a piece of it. So he'd do that. Every once in a while he'd make $5,000 or something in a hunk, and then another 6 months would go by, you know. But he always worked. He did have his own foundry during the war. The war, anybody could do it, but he did have a good foundry going during the war. He also came out to Morton, Washington, to run a mercury mine. All of them, something happened, and it never amounted to anything.
Did your parents always have some sort of connection, or?
Well, they stayed together for us. I think that was more my aunt's doing. She said, "You do not divorce. You do not use. You know, the kids need parent." I'm sure that she was that way, and that they stayed together just for us. And I never saw them kiss each other. Treated each other very nicely. I remember one time when he sat my daughter or my sister and I down on the table and said, "I want you to understand something your mother is going through, something that women go through at this menopause, I imagine. I'm sure it was," but he said, and they are not quite themselves. They can be a little bit irritable, and you just have to tolerate because it will pass, it'll go, and gave us the story. And I can't remember him ever talking to me about sex in any way. But they slept together in the same bed. There wasn't room to have anything more. But he didn't always come home.
So, would you say that you were free to try as many things as you wanted, or were you restricted by something or someone?
I was pretty free because on our bicycles we'd ride everywhere and challenge it. One in front would do it. We'd ride up and down these concrete things that are about 4 inches wide and next to a driveway, and see how far you could go, and then anyway, just we do things on bicycles, that just invent something that would be a challenge and see if you could do it and the other guy couldn't. Tried to do wheelies, but our bikes weren't geared for the wheelies, we discovered to jerk them good. But it was, that's about all I can think of really at the moment.
How would you describe your imagination as a child?
Well, I think I was doing in a sense, as the Frisbee and the falling leaves, we were always trying to find a challenge that was different and could do. But if you're talking about imagination, I actually started writing poetry in 3rd grade. Now, I don't remember what I did in 4th and 5th and 6th. I know I had a journal and I wrote poetry in 7th and 8th. But I remember the very first poem I wrote got printed in the school paper. I was in 3rd grade. I said, all the leaves are falling, falling to and fro. Soon they will be covered in clean white snow. That was it. But you do with what you've got. And so imagination, I loved The Wizard of Oz. I loved being in that world. And my good friend, my best friend, was a doctor's son. And he had all the books, and so I read them over there. But that was the only imagination out of books and sort of living in that area. That's all I could say I did.
Okay. How would you describe yourself as a person full of questions? Or would you describe yourself as a person full of questions? Why or why not?
I don't think so.
No.
I'm a man. I don't ask questions. I don't remember being that curious of anything that I keep asking why. I found that over the years, and more as an adult, that I have very good deductive abilities. I see something, and my wife will say, "What's that doing there for?" I said, "Well, that's for such and such and so forth." I could see why it was there, and I may have been wrong, but I thought I did because I'm a man. I know why that's there. So, no, I don't remember asking questions that much in any way. I felt self-sufficient. I knew all I thought I needed to know that time.
Tell me about what you excelled in as a child, and how did you know?
I think I mentioned that I excelled in running. I was a good runner, and I evaded a lot of things. I wrote a poem one time about a big guy about 4 inches taller than I was that came here from New York, and he was street smart, and we go up to school together, and then somehow a fight started. You never know how they start. And it was sort of uphill. And he was taller than I was anyway, and there's no way I could get around and get uphill from him. He was always managed to stay uphill. So in the end of the poem, I said that I used the tactics that I had always known to be successful and best. I ran. So that was what I was good at, was running, catching a football. My father was a great right-in, and I was going to be one when I got there. And it did quite happen. I got a girlfriend instead. But no, that's. And I was the class clown. was the class count, and I think that may come along because that's one of my avocations. I enjoyed getting the attention. As a middle child, my sister was the doll, and my brother was the genius. And I was in the middle and shifted myself, but I wanted attention. And I couldn't get it from my father, so I got it in class. Unfortunately, I got the teacher's attention too, quite often. And but it all led to good things. And I don't know what of course I could have gotten better grades in high school if I had applied myself, because as freshmen, one of my good friends and I was first and he was second in our class. And when we ended the fourth year, he was the valedictorian, and I had a B average. But it came about through the way I am and what I did. I did what I needed to do to get by, let's say. I wasn't going to be the most brilliant student in class, but my grades were always fine. I was in as a X classes most of the time, but that led to my downfall and my pick up again along the way. And it's high school. I guess I could cover that too, because I was in, as I say, X class, which is an advanced, and in trigonometry, and I was good in mathematics. And I had other things to do. I'd listen to radio and whatever, and I would do half of the homework that she assigned. And when the first grades came out, I got a 50. That is totally failing. Although all of my tests had been perfect A's. But she gave me 100 on tests and 50 on homework. Oh no, so I got a 75. 75 is not, you have to get an 85 or above to stay in the next class. So I got a 75. All that was a warning, I think. But I took it as a challenge. And I went to the principal, the vice principal actually, and Mr. Baker, I remember him. And I read him the report card, which says, homework is not compulsory. However, if a child is falling behind or such and such and so forth, it behooves you to talk with the student and get more and more homework, blah, blah, blah. It's just, homework is not compulsory. I showed him that. I said, so she can't give me a grade on my homework. He said, the teacher is the teacher and she's in charge in her classroom, and anything she wants to do, she can do. He said, if you don't want to accept that grade, you can drop the class and won't affect your grade at all. Otherwise, you may fail, I said, I won't accept that. So I dropped the class. That was my junior year. In my junior year, I had set a high jump record for the city, and I was number 1. So in my senior year, I went out for track, and the track coach came flying over and said, what in the hell, what did you do? What did you do? What do you mean? He said, you dropped the class. Yes, I wouldn't accept what she was doing. He said, you can't do that. You're not eligible for athletics. He said, why didn't you let her flunk you? You'd be eligible if you flunked you. I'd be eligible if I flunked, but I wouldn't be if I dropped it. So I couldn't go out for track in my senior year. But I guess I should say this somewhere along the line, why I'm so optimistic and so egotistical and so self-confident is that every time I have a setback in life, and that was a big one, something else pops up and takes its place. And what happened was, during the first 3 years there in high school, my friend and I, and he was 3 inches taller than I was, but we high jumped and we tied in every single meet in the intermeet. And so on a day that he went to the relays event, and I couldn't go, my brother asked me to come to Marquette University and high jump in an intra-fraternity track meet and use his name. So I went there and I used it, and I won the high jump. Well, the event was put on or judged by the track team. And when they saw me jumping there, he said, "Why aren't you out for track?" I said, "Well, I'm too busy." And it all came out finally, because they wanted me out for track. I said, "No, I'm still in high school." Well, that disqualified him, of course, but they took me over to see the coach. And the coach, talked to me for a little while, and he said, "How would you like to come to Marquette?" Well, I was Catholic to begin with, and that's Catholic University. I thought, wonderful opportunity. He said, "Because I'd be happy to get you a scholarship." So because I was unable to jump in high school in my senior year, I get an entree to Marquette, and I got a full scholarship out of it.
Wow.
So it was a fortuitous event. So I always look at these things and say, well, that did work. What's coming along here? If something's going to be, it's happened time and time again, honestly. Everything has worked well. But if you consider making money, lots of money, I haven't made a lot of money. But I always managed to get through the tough times, and I've never been without a job. But having 6 children, I always had to have a job, and I couldn't do what I wanted to do, like pursue a career in this, that, or the other thing. Hang around, honey, I'm going to go out and do this. And yet it came along, it presented itself to me in due time. So I've got a great life and great confidence. And I'm grateful to the 2 guys that taught me how to dodge, because both of them died in the war. Both were pilots, and they hadn't learned to dodge quite as well as they could, as should have. And that was, but they were quite the guys.
Let's see.
I could have been a good football player. Again, I'm very happy that I didn't, because high jumping ruined my knee. Of course, it didn't ruin it until I high jumped for 4 or 5 years as a senior when I was in my 60s. That's when it probably went bad. But I was undefeated as a Northwest high jumper in the Senior Olympics in the Northwest, that is the Northwest, for a 4 or 5 year period. But then I reached out and tried to do too much. It was so easy to win medals. I did the shot put, and if they had only a few entries, they needed more. I got a 3rd place in a shot put, which is ridiculous. I can't hit it. But I was only 3 guys competing, and I got a bunch of. I almost ran a javelin through my foot throwing the javelin too. I stumbled on the thread and turned into the ground. And but it was fun trying, and I got a whole bunch of ribbons and stuff from it. But that's stupid macho ego to think. It's just fun to get back into it again. But I really think I would have been quite a football player because I did that. Sandlot football and my ability to get clear. So if you get a good passer, you're got it made, because I could fake anybody out, I thought, but I didn't fake my wife out. She said, if you're going out for football, you can just forget about me. When we were, juniors in high school. And the coach, and the other thing, I was only about 90-some pounds. When I graduated from high school, I weighed 92 pounds. When I went into the Army, I weighed 122 pounds. And I came out 150 pounds. But even after that, I didn't lose much. I think I lost about an inch in my height. I was lifting another 20 pounds beyond what I had done in high school, but I still was high jumping it, and I got my letter in college, high jumping, but without coaching, and there was none in those days, and now that the new Fosbury flop has found mechanically and everything, it's the best way to go. If I'd had some coaching, I think I'd have done a lot better. But I felt that I did real good because I was only 6 inches away from the world's record in college. And then in my 60s, I was only 3 inches away from the world record for my age group. So I figured I was improving all the way along. But I love competition. I despise exercise, jogging, swimming. I don't like any of them. But anything competitive, I'll play tennis till I drop. But now my shoulders are gone. I can't do that either. So anyway, I could have been a better high jumper with any kind of training. Our coach was a distance man. He didn't know anything about high jumping either. There was no coaching then. You did what you saw on them. So yeah, I could have done better in school. I could have done better in athletics. But I didn't want to concentrate on any one. I like to do them all. Great pool player, Anyway, I'm happy with where I am, so that worked.
So you touched on a little bit about your friends.
Yeah, actually in that area, besides Bill Gravener and Dick Gamble, there were, I said, the doctor's son, Bill Kiley, and there's an incident there that sort of told me who I was. He was my best friend. He came over. His father sent him over to visit me whenever I had chicken pox or measles or anything, because his doctor wanted him to get the measles as a child, But he brought me books. He was just great, and he had other books that I wanted to read. He was a good friend, but one day I went to his house and rang doorbell, and he came in the door. Oh, Glen, come on in. Because a big party going on. And I said, no, what's going on? It's my birthday. Come on. Oh, no, I can't. Why? You don't come down. Oh, no, and I just turned around and ran. I hadn't been invited. What a slight. His mother, who ultimately divorced her doctor and married the president of Schuster's, the big store downtown. They're all, and Bill, Kyle and I used to go get onto their boat, a great big racing sloop of some kind, and we'd swab the decks and do a lot of things like that, and we'd swim off of it in the lake at the time, but they were rich people. And when she made out the list, she just probably didn't think, because he swears he told her I wanted me on, but she didn't think I belonged with the other people, you know. And so what I did, I wanted to go to the party, but I couldn't go without a gift. I went home, I went to my grandmother's house, and she literally wrapped up a couple of silk handkerchiefs for him. And this is, 8, 9 years old, something like that. And I took them. I can imagine some people laughing, and handkerchiefs. But I had to be at the party. But that was it. I also had I've done this throughout my life too. There was a boy named Melvin Mosier who was a terrible stutterer. And he had to sing to get anything out, and he would stutter badly, and he was not popular at all. But he was faster and our fastest man on the track team. But parents would let him out, let him fall out for athletics. But he looked like he ran sitting down. And I remember seeing runners that looked like that. They didn't lean forward, they just, but he was a good friend. And we didn't do things much together, but I was over at his house a number of times, and I'd be with him on the school grounds. And he died young. But I have been a friend to 3 other retarded people that have sort of brought themselves by their bootstraps, and they would call me and they'd talk forever, and I would just let them talk, and hard to get them off. You'd say, well, okay then, or okay, and they would keep going, but I'm not going to shut them off. And I always had that, but I also know that I could not be a caretaker. First of all, I can take them as, equal on that basis, but I know I could not take care of retarded children, teach them, older people. I'm being very good right now and sacrificing a lot of time, almost worthlessly, just so that she knows somebody's there every day to not leave her. But that I've done, and then I know my shortcomings. I couldn't, I think what a wonderful thing that there's some people will take in these people. Terrible problems and deal with them. I can't do that. I could be forced to, but I wouldn't take it as a... But there were a few friends, but nothing really since Bill Kiley until 5th grade, and my one true friend, Fritz Myers, that still is, and that's the only one that I ever really retained as a lifelong friend.
So, kind of from a historical perspective, thinking about your middle childhood, young childhood, what historical events can you remember from when you were young?
Well, I can remember the Al Smith, Herbert Hoover campaign. Being Catholic, Al Smith was the first Catholic ever to run for presidency, and I thought he was a shoo-in. As I was growing up, I had the idea, the feeling that I was in the majority, that Catholicism was the big thing. I didn't realize it was a minority, actually, you know. That's all I knew was Catholicism. And so I was invited. I know I sold posters, pictures of Al Smith around different places. Before the election, I remember also that I sold NRA banners, National Recovery Act, to various stores up and down my street. They knew me, and they'd put them in their windows during Roosevelt's time. I don't remember really in that time any historical events. Between the First World War and the Second World War, there wasn't anything really that big that I would remember happening. That's about all I can remember. It came quite a bit later because I know that I was almost devastated by Roosevelt's death because the war was almost over and he died, and he's the only president I actually knew, you know, in all those years, 12 years, I guess. So when he died, it was strange.
What did you want to be when you grew up, and why?
Well, like most people, I'd say, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew and I recognized for a long time that I needed recognition for who I was and what I did. I wanted recognition, and one of the ways I could get it was comedy. And I told jokes. I ad-libbed things funny. I recognized I'd get great laughs. In fact, I was probably, because it was at theater, I was probably no older than 12 or less. I can't remember the year now, but when Joe Louis beat Max Schmeling in this big fight, and he'd been beaten before, and he just slaughtered the guy. And I saw that. I went to the movie with my sister, and Bobby Breen, a boy singer, was in the movie, and he had a song that he sang several times in the movie, and it started out, "Sleep, my pretty one, sleep, my little one." And the movie was over, and the newsreel came on, and there was Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, and in the first round, he just clobbered him dead, you know. And right then, in my high soprano voice, just like Bobby Breen, you know, I sleep, my pretty one, sleep, my... The audience just busted up. I stayed for the next movie so I could do it again. And I thought, what an exhilarating... I made a whole audience just, you know, laugh. And it worked. And that got into me. I thought, I can get attention, you know. I can do things. It was a spur-of-the-moment thought that fit, but I think from that, I always knew I wanted to be, to some extent, on stage. I attract attention to myself, you know, and but what that amounted to, I don't, you know, specifically, I don't think I knew. But I knew it was in the writing area, or public relations, something like that, you know. And so that continued, you know, as an adolescent. I didn't have any goals, and I wrote something to my children. I do this from time to time. I wrote something about children of a realization. This is only about 5 years ago. I said, I realized that I have ad-libbed my way through life. I never plan ahead because I always know that whatever comes, I can handle it. And there's a lot of philosophy involved in that. I have always known that with 6 children and their spouses, 14 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, the odds and something tragic happening are really strong that something's going to happen to one of those kids. I'm prepared for that. And that's not being morbid. So I say, oh, that's not morbid? No, it's not morbid. That's just, if it happens, I'm ready to handle it. Because it seems like it ought to with those odds. And I have also had a feeling forever, at least in later years, when something bad happens, I don't say, oh, why me? Why does this happen to me? I just don't. I say constantly, why hasn't it happened to me? Why hasn't it? I haven't earned it because whatever I've got was given to me. I'm using it to advantage, earning a living, being happy, getting attention, but I don't deserve anything. This is somebody who would tell me this is God's grace. Well, yeah, but a lot of other people need this grace, you know. In that thing where I said I ad-libbed my way through life, I have never planned for the future. I even say when you ask me about goals, I know what I sort of desired, but it wasn't a goal. I was trying to make it work. I never had any actual goals. But whatever comes along, I adjust to the circumstances and make something of it. And I don't ever say, oh, why me? I can say that about the stock market. why can't I make money in the stock market? People just pile it up, you know. And one example was really funny. Microsoft was just going like constantly, and somebody said, buy Microsoft, and people were complaining about it. Said, hey, I'll tell you what, if you want to put a stop to Microsoft, sell me some Microsoft stock. That'll kill them. They'll know I'm in there. They'll know I'm in there. It'll happen. I swear. I bought it on Monday, and it was like 90. And by Friday, it had fallen to 81. And I told him, listen, I don't want to ruin the company. Sell it. I don't want to ruin the company. And immediately it bounced back and went flying. And this has been my experience. I just can't pick. And I bought books on it, how to do it. And at the moment, I've got very little to gamble with. But I thought, well, I can work on short-term things. There's always these things that are only $1 or $2, and they'll double. And man, you run in a hurry, then they'll fall down again, of course. But I mean, they're volatile. And so I subscribed to this service, and I spread this money across 10 different companies. All had this good chance. 8 of them have given me a profit of about $2,000. 2 have given me a loss of $2,100. I'm even, so to speak. I just, it's been my experience, that's all. And after seeing that didn't work, and however it just didn't work, I decided from reading that all the money ultimately is made in real estate, and I got into 4 real estate like timeshare thing, projects that by somebody we knew who had been extremely successful in building the money 3 or 4 times within 3 or 4 years, and then selling. You've got 3 or 4 by the time put in. I ended up paying monthly for several years, and it was in the early 80s, and I got $119,000 invested in 4 different projects. This fellow had been, all of us have been successful. And then the Environmental Protection Agency came in, the Wetlands Commission was formed, and suddenly you have to start selling the property to pay for the big companies were afraid to buy the land until they could be sure they could build on it. And all of a sudden this whole bubble burst. And the 119,000 went down drain. That was my whole nest egg. That was back in the 80s. Well, now I'm retired, and just 2 months ago, I got the notice that this holding company had been dissolved, and they distributed the fund, and then they distributed $13,000 from that 119,000. That's all was left. But it was a wonderful thing to get at that time. And since I got it, it's gone up to 19,000. And man, it's been working, But the only thing I'm good at is blackjack. I've never lost at Vegas. And I've often said, but never did it. That's silly, Why am I in the stock market? Let's just take this money down to Vegas. And you do that, that's the big... I'm not addicted to gambling at all. But I know what I know, and when I study before I go, I can do it. But if I took a big hunk down there, I'd be scared instead of confident. Like you think, oh, don't make this thing. But anyway, that's why. And I wrote this letter to my kids, just telling them what I'd finally discovered about myself. That I just have never planned for the future. Now I'm at a stage where I ought to do a little planning, because I don't have a will since my wife died in 95. I haven't changed my will. I don't have much to leave to anybody. But there's certain things that, I don't want things to go to probate and have to prove who gets the car or how they do the, and everything, attorneys get all the money. So I have had to do that, so I have not done it yet. I'm just too involved in so many projects right now. That's one of them I haven't done. I have a list that I keep, like about like this page, where do this, and I did about 5 out of the 30 that I'm still working on. But that's more basically how I live my life, though. It's whatever comes along. I'm adjusting to my current living situation because I don't have my apartment back because I rented it out to a family friend who's just dying if I have to evict her. But my bedroom is still mine, my den is still mine where I do my work. But the bathroom is 2 miles down the hall, and the kitchen that I use is out there too. And it's just tough going back and forth and getting things done like that. So it's not if I had my whole apartment, it'd be different. Because she has the kitchen, I don't bother her.